Hi guys, so we are on 11.4. This section is a little long, so just bear with me. So first we're going to talk about how Rome conquers the world. So before we move on to the next slide, there's a few things we need to know. In 509 BC, Rome overthrew the Etruscans, who had ruled over them for more than 100 years. The Latin tribes joined together with Rome to form the Latin League. The cities within this league helped each other fight their enemies. The league worked great for a while, but as Romans gradually grew stronger and stronger, the Latins feared them. So by 338 BC, the Romans had conquered all the other Latins. Fearing Rome, the Greek colonies in southern Italy asked the king of Greece to help them defeat Rome. The Greeks actually gave Rome several hard blows, like battles and stuff like that. But by 270 BC, all the Greek cities in southern Italy belonged to Rome. So that meant that almost all of the Apennine Peninsula was now Rome's. Rome had been fighting with their neighbors for over 200 years, and the constant fighting was good training for Rome's soldiers, and it gave the Romans a thirst to keep conquering. So we're going to see what all they conquer. So first and foremost, they fight the Carthagins. The Carthagins were Phoenicians, and they had found the trading post, and it was a great African city. And by 300 BC, Carthage had become a major power in the Mediterranean area. She had a powerful navy that allowed her to control parts of Spain and western Sicily, which is the island not far from Italy. But fearful of the power of Carthage and jealous of all the wealth that they had, the Romes decided to conquer that. Okay, so the Romans were able to get an abandoned ship that they found from the Carthaginians, and they were able to make 100 exact replicas of this ship in only 60 days. So they made 100 ships in 60 days. That is crazy. They worked so hard. And granted, they weren't trained like navy-wise, but they were determined to beat the Carthaginians because they wanted their land and their power. So the Romans decided to make this portable bridge that could be slammed into the other Carthaginian ship from a Roman ship, allowing the Romans to board their enemy ship and fight the best way that they knew to do. The war in which this battle took place, it was over 23 years. So for 23 years, the Carthaginians and the Romans were in a war. They were in battles. And they actually caused, within these 23 years, there were 3 different wars. And these wars were called the Punic Wars. So the first one, easy peasy. The first war, Rome conquered Sicily. It was as easy as snapping their fingers. The next war, they had a little fight. Carthage surrendered the Iberian Peninsula, which is modern Spain and Portugal, over to Rome. But there was this guy that the Carthaginians had, and his name was Hannibal. Now, some of you might think, wait, is that where cannibal come from? No, it's not. That's just his name. But when Hannibal was 9 years old, he promised his father that he would conquer the Romans. So when he grew up, he set to do that. He set to not break that promise that he made to his father. So instead of marching over to Rome, he decided to sail across the Mediterranean Sea and to Spain. And then he even went through Gaul, which is modern France, and he marched with his army that had about 40,000 men. And along with these men were hundreds of mules and horses and 37 war elephants. And these elephants and these animals, they carried the army's food and equipment. So here's a picture of what it possibly would have looked like, because they had to go through the Alps, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But look at all that. Look at all the elephants that they had and the animals. I mean, I don't know. I'd be kind of scared if I was riding an elephant on the mountainside. I'd probably be scared I'd fall off, but times were different back then. So, like I said earlier, they had to cross the Alps, and we talked about the Alps, I think, a section ago, and they were very, very snowy and cold, and because they were going through this mountain, a lot of men and animals died going onto the Alps, crossing the Alps. But the Carthaginians did win many battles against the Romans once they got there, but unfortunately, they lost the whole Second Punic War. Yeah, all that work, and they still didn't win. Next, the last one is the Third Punic War. So during the Third War, Rome completely destroyed the city of Carthage. Excuse me. They did it by burning the city and putting salt in their land. So that might sound funny. Why would they put salt in their land? But salt actually made the land useless for growing plants and crops for many years. And without crops to supply food, the Carthage could not rebuild their city. So she was no longer a threat to Rome. Rome was building an empire, and now it included the Apennine Peninsula, the Iberian Peninsula, and part of Africa. And let me just tell you, it doesn't stop there. Rome keeps taking over land. So, Rome doesn't only conquer the Carthaginians and their land and part of the Iberian Peninsula in Africa, they also conquer all of these. They conquer the Macedonia, Greece, the Pergamum, and Syria and Mesopotamia. So they take over all, not 2, not 3, but they take over 5 different lands. Okay, so during the Punic Wars, Rome also attacked other countries. Macedonia and the homeland, which was the homeland of King Philip and Alexander the Great, had helped to get even. Rome conquered Macedonia at the same time. The city-states of Greece were quarreling among themselves. Rome also conquered them. So Rome conquered the land that Alexander the Great was at. And then the Pergamum, it was located in Asia Minor. And if you guys remember, a long, long time ago, we talked about Asia Minor. It was actually called modern Turkey. And the king of this town and this country was actually very friendly with Rome. But in 133 BC, the king knew that he was dying and he didn't have an heir to his throne. So he asked Rome to take over the kingdom. And Rome, of course, accepted because it was more land for them. The Pergamums was Rome's first province, and that means a land that was ruled by another country in Asia. So that means that they didn't necessarily overthrow them, but the land was given to them. So now Rome is in touch with 3 different continents: Europe, Africa, and Asia. And the last 2 were Syria and Mesopotamia. So by 129 BC, Rome had conquered Mesopotamia, but then in 64 BC, Syria also became a Roman province. Remember, a land ruled by another country. Palestine, which had been under Syrian rule, now had to obey Roman officials. This is how the Romans came to be the rulers of the Holy Land during the time of Christ. Next, we have Julius Caesar. By 60 BC, Rome had a new leader, and his name was Julius Caesar. He was on his way to become the greatest name in world history. In 59 BC, he was elected as a council of Rome. Remember, that means like basically a ruler, a king. Eager to gain fame and popularity, Caesar sent out to conquer Gaul, which was modern France. He even invaded Britain twice. And indeed, he did become one of the greatest military leaders in history. Well, because he was so popular and he invaded all these lands, some people were actually jealous of Julius Caesar because of his success. There was actually a government leader of the name Pompey. He was very jealous of Caesar's popularity with the Roman citizens. And in an effort to stop his fame, the Senate, which if we remember correctly, is a group of old wise men, sent Caesar in order to disband his army and return home. But he didn't obey. Julius Caesar did not obey. And there's even there may have even been a plot to kill Caesar on his way home. So instead of obeying, Caesar took his army across the Rubicon River and into Italy. So there's this term, as some people say, crossing the Rubicon, and that means committing a deed that can never be reversed. So because Julius Caesar did this, this was a direct act of disobedience to the government. So would the Roman citizens kill him for being a traitor, or accept him as a hero for becoming conquering all this land and coming back to his people? But because he disobeyed and because he crossed the Rubicon and didn't come straight home, this caused Julius Caesar to start a civil war with his own people, with his own land. But since everyone was so scared of his powerful, strong army, every country that he came through or went through to try to get back to Rome, they were so scared of him that they just let him pass without any problem or stirring anything up. So that was pretty cool. And then once he got to Italy and Rome, since Pompey was still there and he's the one who sent the orders, he fled Rome because he was scared of Julius Caesar. So, some more things. For 5 years, so from 49 BC to 44 BC, Julius Caesar conquered Rome. He also became the dictator for the rest of his life. And a dictator is a person who has absolute rule in his country's government, controlling all of its major decisions. However, when we think of the word dictator, we think of not very pleasant. We think of very selfish and cruel. But however, Caesar worked to make his countrymen like him. So instead of killing and imprisoning his enemies and chopping off their heads like past rulers had done, he pardoned them. He had grace. And he did his best to stop dishonesty. He improved the calendar. He worked to become a friend of the poor by providing jobs for them. He looked into his country's future by planning many projects like building roads, buildings, and a new land in the Rome territory. But something happened. Some of the men in the Senate, same people, remember, were still jealous of his fame. They couldn't get over it. So he didn't have time to make these plans because these men decided to plot against Caesar and stab him to death. And this happened on March 15th, 44 BC. So he unfortunately died before he could do all these wonderful things that he wanted to do. But the people, the Senate who murdered him, they thought that everyone was gonna be excited and that they were gonna become heroes. But they actually had to end up fleeing Rome for their lives because people hated that they killed Julius Caesar because they loved him so much. So since Julius Caesar is dead, Caesar's best friend, closest friend and assistant, Mark Antony, began ruling in his place. But Julius Caesar had named his 18-year-old grandnephew, Octavian, as his heir. So both Octavian and Mark Antony they both wanted to rule. So the question we need to ask ourselves at the end of this section is, who would force and would force and violence once again decide who would rule Rome, or do you think they're going to come to terms? We will have to wait and see. So that is it for 11.4. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to check Edmodo for all your other assignments. All right, guys, I'll see you later.